Thank you, Member. Member for Cariboo North.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize to you and other members of the House that I couldn't control myself when the previous member was speaking, because I made a commitment when I was elected here that I wouldn't engage in some of the nonsense that passes for debate in here, but I had a hard time sitting listening to this. If you actually condense what the Parliamentary Secretary for Silviculture had to say about supposedly a substantive bill is, Madam Speaker, it's the right thing to do. That was it. That was the sum total of the argument. It's the right thing to do. Well, that's really a very interesting way to rationalize a bill that is supposed to be of a substantive nature. It's the right thing to do. Now, again, it begs the question of what a parliamentary secretary does, particularly when you've got silviculture in your portfolio and you're supposed to know that file and you're supposed to bring something substantive into this House to deal with that. What did we get? We got political rhetoric. We got him having to go back to the 1990s and actually present disingenuous arguments about what happened there just to justify himself and make him feel good. And as I indicated in my little heckle, we got the ultimate in 3 Ps that makes it almost impossible for us to govern this province or any other Western democracy. The ultimate 3P is petty partisan politics. And I'm going to speak about the mountain pine beetle in my response, and I will correct the record. I challenge the member to bring forward into this House the statement supposedly that I said mow down the forest and replant it. I don't think you can come into this House and make a statement without having a justification and a evidence for that. So I challenge the member to present that evidence to me directly. But I want to talk about the substance of this bill, and I want to talk about why this bill in its form is wrong, conceptually may be right. The member's correct. As a concept, zero net deforestation is not wrong. It's laudable. But we must get to a point where we, as elected officials, actually are engaged substantively in the formulation of the laws that govern this province. We should never be caught in this House by bills that come forward that have not had substantive public debate, that have not sustained scrutiny by experts and by stakeholders and by other people who have vested interests. We should never have a bill come into this House that catches anybody by surprise or that is a fluff piece of legislation that adds to the cynicism of the electorate that's already out there. Never. That's what's wrong with this place. That's what's wrong with our democracy, is that we think the electorate doesn't care. Well, they do care. And those who are not voting care enough not to go into a ballot box for the most part because they cannot stand what we offer. They cannot buy the petty partisan politics that passes for governance in this province. And it has to stop, Madam Speaker. And this bill typifies that. This bill typifies that. 2 years ago, in 2008, we were promised zero net, I always reverse it, zero net deforestation as part of this government's climate change strategy. 2 years. What do we get 2 years later? We get 2 pages. One, you could have gotten from the Webster's Dictionary within about 15 minutes. It's a page of definitions. The second one, what does it say? Does it give us plans? Does it give us strategies? Does it give us implementation, action, resources? Nothing. What does it say? It says that this cabinet and this government will figure out how to do this at some point in the near future and hopefully by 2012.
2015.
And then by 2015, it supposedly has done something. Well, Madam Speaker, let me disabuse the members opposite. In that 2008 speech, the government promised that we would get zero net deforestation. In that speech, it said that the not satisfactorily restocked, and in the future I'll refer to that as NSR, not satisfactorily restocked, that's areas of Crown Forest land that do not meet the Chief Forester's requirements for a free-to-grow status, that it's actually back to a productive, healthy forest. The throne speech in 2008 said there were 700,000 hectares of NSR. In the presentation of this bill, the Forest Minister says that number is actually 750,000. And we were promised in 2008 explicitly, and this is a direct quote from the speech to the throne, all forest land currently identified as not sufficiently restocked will be replanted, and no NSR backlogs will be allowed to develop in ensuing years. Now, I take it that in ensuing years is kind of 09, 2010, 2011, and yet between 28 and 2010, somehow 50,000 more hectares have appeared on NSR. In actual fact, and I'll speak to this in a minute, Madam Speaker, the Forest Practices Branch, in a recent report last fall, said that the NSR, the not satisfactorily stocked, is over 1.4 million hectares, double what this government is indicating, double what the Forest Minister is indicating, and the Forest Minister will be accountable to that when we get into estimates. Why the difference? When his own ministry calls it 1.4 million plus, and the minister stands up and puts this bill forward and says it's 750,000. That shows you how bankrupt this government's inventory is of our Crown land base. How can you manage the #1 asset of this province when you don't know what you're managing? When you have that much of a difference that you have to reconcile? A full double, not satisfactorily restocked. Why is that important? Well, you see, this bill is supposed to somehow make 6,200 hectares of development properties where you deforest, make that backlog disappear. That's the argument that we've gotten from a couple of the members from the opposite side. So I want to know what the math is of 6,200 hectares a year being deforested for development against 1.4 million backlog NSR. How does that math work out? I think that's a few years of very hard work and substantial dollars to address just what already exists in backlog. No wonder we laughed when the minister brought this bill into the House, because it is laughable, not in concept, in principle, and in timing, and in the way the government's planning on going about this. That's what's laughable. Now, so we got this increase already since 2008. Now, the basic math of forestry, and the Parliamentary Secretary for Silviculture ought to have known this. For every 1,000 hectares of forest land, it takes about 100,000 trees to replant that to stocking standards. So for 1,000 hectares, 100,000 trees. Let me walk you through some math to see what the real problem is and why it is insulting that 6,200 hectares is supposed to solve this problem. So first, the backlog NSR, as I've indicated, by the ministry's own documentation, is 1.4 million hectares. However, accumulating fire as it rolls up was 1 million hectares since 2003. Some of that's been replanted, some has not. The minister has indicated he expects more catastrophic fires in the future. We haven't even addressed fully the 2003 fire event, Madam Speaker. And in many cases, fire actually sterilizes the soil to the point that you cannot get it back for forests for generations. And that's not documented in the ministry's inventory. We don't have those figures. So when you talk about deforestation, this government's talking about zero net deforestation related to development. Well, what about sterilized forest soils? That's deforested, and no amount of planting will bring it back for generations to come. That's not in this calculation.